Hi everyone, Thumper here, and welcome to this APAF F-16 training demonstration. Today we're going to be covering the contents of CS-3, which is Core Skills 3, which deals with air-to-air refueling. So let's get started. Alright everyone, let me first start off by saying that when I started out in DCS, I found air-to-air refueling to be one of the most difficult things to master in the game. Because you spend a lot of time concerned about how to deconflict your aircraft and how to never make contact with another aircraft in the sky. And then all of a sudden, it's time to make contact with another aircraft. Let's talk about how the F-16 does air-to-air refueling. We refuel via a boom. So we'll pull up to a tanker, it'll have a boom come out, and that boom is going to slot into the refueling port. Here on F2, we can see that port open up. That's where the fuel is going to be put in. Currently got myself established at Angels 23, and we are just holding straight. I would recommend when you're first starting out, just to do it with a naked aircraft. Don't bring a bunch of weapons. However, as you keep training, it is definitely going to be best to have a full loadout to simulate an actual mission. So currently, I have the full loadout including all 3 pods underneath me. So I get some of that rightward and leftward drift as I try to trim out my aircraft. Let me reestablish this altitude hold by closing my fuel door. So first we need to establish where the tanker is. So what we're going to do is hit left alt B to bring up our briefing card. Most briefing cards on a server are going to have information about where their tankers are if you just scroll down a little bit. Let's see. So for us, we can see that Spider-Man is a boom tanker. That's what we need in the F-16. We're going to be going 255 megahertz. 101 Yankee is our TACAN. TACAN is how we are going to zero in on this aircraft and find its location. We showed Buddy TACAN earlier on, but now we're going to hone in on another air target. So let's set up the Buddy TACAN first. We're going to hit TILS, which is TACAN ILS, and it's going to bring up this menu. We're going to punch in 1, 0, 1, and we'll hit 0 for mode select, enter, and that's going to switch us to the Yankee band. And now we can hear our TACAN receiver is getting something. There's another step here though. We need to switch over to air-to-air transmit receive is how it is actually done. And then down between our legs on our HSI, we'll hit the mode button twice until it brings up TACAN. And this outer arrow here is going to be vectoring us on to our tanker. Now there is a kind of DCSism that I see a lot of people use, whereas if you just sequence back over and go to regular transmit receive, it will give you the distance to the tanker. Now, it's not actually supposed to do that in real life. It's my understanding that it does not do that, so I generally don't use it because it's helpful just to know how to find it without it. Now, the next thing we can set up is we can come down here to our right panel and we can toggle this up to DED data. What this will do is reflect whatever's on our DED up here onto the HUD. So if we go to our fuel page, here we can actually have this reflect how much fuel we have, and we can know how close we are to being full. Again, this is something I prefer personally not to use because I find this throws me off. If I'm worried about what the number is, I'm not worried about just flying the jet. So I keep this turned off. Alright, so we know our frequency. Let's go ahead and tune our radio to talk to the tanker. COM1 25500. Enter. And let's pull up our F10 menu. Tanker. Arco is going to be in... I know on my case, Arco is going to be the F-16 tanker. Sometimes this will be different depending on the server.
Arco 1111. Request rejoin. 11 Arco 11. Proceed to pre-contact at 21,000 at 300.
Alright. We know that he's at Angels 21, going at 300 knots, roughly. Sometimes it'll be a little off, usually by about 20 knots, but now we're going to go ahead and try to find him. Using what we know, this is the next thing I'm going to do. This is something I like to do. I often like to fly my jet with this heading select knob. So what we'll do is we'll move this heading up, and it's this little yellow mark. We'll move it to match where our outer blue arrow is. We'll throw on the heading select autopilot, and it'll start turning us that direction. It's just a neat little trick. You obviously don't have to do this, you can just fly the jet, but I tend to fly with autopilot a lot, just to keep things easy for me when I'm traveling from place to place. Alright, at this point, my heading indicator is directly on my arrow, off in front of us, and it may not be visible through YouTube, but currently, right about here, there's a speck where we can see the tanker off our nose. Knowing how to work the radar at this point in our lessons is not necessary, but if you know how to work the radar, it is very helpful. We can do what's called a radar assisted join. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and lock up the tanker. The reason this is helpful is because right here, up along the top, we get a bunch of information about our locked up target. But right here, we can see our closure rate, which is currently just 4 knots. If I speed up, we see that number increase. If I slow down, we'll see it decrease again, and so forth. Using the radar, we can bring ourselves in for a much easier join on the tanker. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and bring myself out of autopilot. And we're going to start flying to join up with the tanker. So I can see that the tanker's about 3 miles off. My closure rate is decreasing currently as I go to idle. Like he may enter the clouds here for a moment. And I'm going to try to keep about 100 knots of closure. I'm going to keep my velocity vector off to his left here as we join up. And I'm going to bring the speed back. We're within a mile now. And we can see closure rate is still decreasing. If we look close, we can see his boom already out. He's ready for me. And we'll start vectoring in here. Just controlling our closure, just like we talked about in the previous lesson. And we have arrived here off of his left wing. Use this time once you join up to just feel it out. Feel how everything's moving. Get your aircraft trimmed out. Make sure you're loose on the controls. We do what's called fingertip flying, which is exactly what it sounds like. Just fly using your fingertips. It always feels like it gives you just a bit more control. When you're air-to-air refueling, you never want to find yourself doing what we call a white knuckle, where we're just gripping the stick as hard as we can and we just can't seem to get a hold of it. Just keep in a nice little form flight here before actually slotting into position to take fuel. Some things to keep in mind while doing this is that the F-16 has an extremely delicate throttle. The smallest increments will cause you to speed up or slow down a lot more than you're probably anticipating. The other thing to keep in mind is as your nose pitches up, your speed will decrease. As your nose pitches down, your speed will increase. And the opposite is true. As you increase speed, your nose will want to pitch up. And as you decrease speed, your nose will want to pitch down. So it's just a matter of feeling out the jet, getting a hold of it, getting good at form flight, and just learning to hang out here off of his wing. Once we're feeling confident and we're ready, we'll go ahead and get into pre-contact position. I'm going to decrease my speed. Come back behind him. And just like that, we're in pre-contact. We're going to go ahead and pull up our F10 menu. And ready pre-contact.
Cleared contact.
He's cleared us in. So what I like to do is I like to put my velocity vector directly on the tip of the boom. I want my pilot's head lined up with the tip of the boom. In real life, it is the boom operator's job to move the boom out of the way of the cockpit of the F-16. However, we don't always get that animation in the game. Sometimes we do, but most of the time we don't. And we'll see if it happens here. But what'll happen is sometimes the boom will just clip directly through the cockpit of the F-16, and that's okay. It will not actually make contact. It's just the way the animations work in the game. Sometimes the boom won't move. Just like this. Yes, you'll have people that will hate it. Oh, and there it started the animation, so the boom went up. But approaching it from this direction is quite a bit easier because all we have to control is our speed moving forward towards the tanker instead of moving up at it. Now, what did I forget to do? I forgot to open the fuel door. So we'll look over, turn that switch on, line ourselves back up. If you ever find yourself in an oscillation, just remember, just loosen up on the controls, let go, let it regain, and then come back at it. I'll increase my throttle. That boom's gonna clip right through my face, and that's okay. And now I have to decrease throttle to catch the lights. If you look up, we have two different sets of lights that are green and red. The goal is to have the middle lights lit up on both sets of lights. The right set is going to be your forward and backward positioning, whereas the left set is going to be your vertical positioning. Currently I have both lights green, so tanker should, in theory, plug in here in just a moment.
Contact.
There's contact.
You're taking fuel.
And we're taking fuel. So now I'm just using very small increments to keep control of the aircraft. Now the other thing to mention here is that when I do this, once I get to this position, what works best for me is I completely stop worrying about anything that's on my HUD. Maybe occasionally referencing the velocity vector, but other than that, I'm usually just watching the lights. It's just me and the aircraft above me. Eventually you'll slot into a spot where it'll feel pretty smooth. And he's going into a turn, lucky me. Just a matter of catching it. And keeping those lights green. And transfer complete. Now, had I not gone to the tanker as soon as I took off, that would have taken quite a bit longer. But I had about 8,000 pounds already when I came to the tanker. Now what we'll do is we'll slow down. We'll move over here into what's called observation. Here, any other members of our flights, we can just sit and watch them as they go to take fuel. I've closed my fuel door. And voila, we have a full tank of gas. A final note I wanted to leave everyone with is that you don't have to have a multiplayer server to practice air-to-air refueling. There is simply for the F-16, if we go to instant action, F-16, Caucasus, and right there it is, air-to-air refueling. And this is actually a pretty nicely set up mission for practicing even just general form flight if you're not quite comfortable hooking up to the boom yet. As this loads in here, we should see a tanker. Usually it's crossing from right to left. Oh, however, it looks like it might have changed since then. Looks like we're going to spawn in right next to the tanker. So all we really have to do is just scoot on over here. As we can see up here, contact the tanker at 305. We're already tuned to that. And we can see some AI taking gas already.
altitude.
So use this mission to your advantage as a nice way to practice form flight and air-to-air refueling, even if you don't have access to multiplayer immediately. I hope everybody enjoyed watching, and I look forward to seeing you all on the next one.